Thank you for stopping by my channel. In this video, I will be sharing an interview conducted by the former owner of the sports card company Leaf, Brian Gray. Brian has a YouTube channel where he recently interviewed Bill Mastro. Bill was the founder of Mastro Auctions. He was one of the first owners of the T206 Honus Wagner card, which is now in a PSA 8 holder and owned by Ken Kendrick, who also owns Arizona Diamondbacks. In this interview, Brian did an excellent job discuss the history of the T206 set with Bill and how the Honus Wagner card became the holy grail of the hobby. The most important highlight is that Brian got Bill to speak publicly about how he trimmed this famous Honus Wagner card. These two hobby legends also shared their views on card alteration within the industry. With Brian's permission, I'm excited to share this valuable interview with you. I have summarized the 2 hours interview into 2 videos and included some background information, the topics they discuss. I hope you enjoy them.
And so I'm at, I bought and sold, I don't know how many Wagners over the years. My grandmother found a Wagner card for me. She lived on Staten Island. She called me one day, I think it was like in the early 70s. She calls me up and she goes, "Oh, Billy," she goes, I found a Honus Wagner card for you. And I go, "Come on, Grandma," and she had a cigar box and the Wagner card was in there. My grandmother, my old grandmother.
You should have her outsourcing deals. Holy cow.
It was unbelievable. So, you never know. You never know where they're going to come from. And, but of course, back then it was worth about $500 or $1,000. It wasn't worth a lot of money. And of course, I sold it. I sold them all. And, but if you fast forward to 1986, so I'm at the Philadelphia convention, and a guy named Jay Zimmerman from Long Island, a guy I knew real well. He comes running up to me and he goes, Bill, Bob Sepchuk, who has a store on Long Island, he has a Honus Wagner card. It's in mint condition, and he has sent me down here to approach you, Lou Lipsett, and Barry Halper to buy the card if you want it. It's $25,000. And I go, it's mint condition. And he goes, yes, it's mint condition. He tells me it's mint. And I said, wow, I said, okay, I'll take it. I said, have you contacted Halper or Lipsett yet? No. Okay, don't bother. It's over. I said, give me Sepchuk's number. I'm going to call him. And when I get done with the show here on Sunday, Rob Lipsett and I are going to drive up to Long Island, and I'm going to give him the money in cash and pick up the card. He goes, really? I said, yeah. I said, you say it's mint? I'm in. It's mine. I own it. And so Lipsett and I did everything back then. We were attached to the hip. We don't talk anymore. That's another story. But we drove all the way to Long Island with the idea of buying this mint condition Honus Wagner card. And so we get there, and I call Sepchuk on the phone, and he says, no. He goes, just you come in. No one else to the store. Well, I said, well, Rob, you have to wait here, in the car. And I go inside, and there's Sepchuk standing there with another guy, okay, who I don't know, and I'm not introduced to him. And there's a pile of cards on the counter. They're all T206s. And he goes, here it is. And he shows me the Wagner card. And the card, it looks like football. It's huge. It's got giant curved, but whoever, and I'm looking at the cards, I can realize that this collection in front of me was once an uncut sheet that someone has cut up, and because they knew the Wagner card was valuable, they cut it with huge bowed borders. Okay.
So you saw the next card?
Well, no, you could see the cards were all hand cut, man. There was a pile of them.
When you say huge, you're talking about like maybe they're a half inch too big overall, or
there was obviously he had gone into the borders of the card next to
okay,
him.
good. That's what I was curious.
It was huge. It was very, very large, but the borders were like oval almost.
So he probably destroyed cards in the process of cutting out the Wagner.
I don't know. Okay, there was no additional card on either side.
Let's take a moment here. This picture shows what is believed to be the Honus Wagner card Bill mentioned. If this is the card, you can see that the left and right borders are uneven. However, they are not as wide as a football as Bill described, unless this image was taken after the Wagner had been trimmed down from a wider border. Bill also explained later in the interview how many times he trimmed this card.
The top and bottom were fairly straight, hand cut, but the sides were jumbo.
I haven't seen a Wagner uncut sheet. Is he in the middle of the sheet?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Bill described his Wagner card as having the widest border. However, there's another Wagner that collectors often call the Jumbo Wagner, currently in a PSA 5 holder with a miscut qualifier. As you can see, this PSA 5 Wagner has a huge border at the bottom.
And if the borders were, if it was cut on all 4 sides, because it was at the top of the bottom of the sheet.
Well, yes, no, they were definitely all.
So he probably was in the middle of a sheet somewhere.
Well, yeah, so now I'm looking at
my Wagner experience later, because I've never seen a sheet. I'd only seen the little strip that was in
strip, yeah,
which was like 5 or 6 cards on the strip. In the middle of the strip, which tells me there were cards on the side for sure, because I saw the strip.
The strip Brian mentioned here is the only known uncut T206 strip previously owned by Honus Wagner himself and found in his estate. It contains 5 cards and is believed to have been a test strip used by a salesman to persuade Wagner to allow his image on tobacco cards.
This sheet, I looked at it and I said to Sevchuk, I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, this pile I'm standing here with was an uncut sheet and someone cut it up? And he goes, oh, I don't know anything about that. Now, I'm looking at the guy next to him, and I know that's the guy that cut the sheet up. And
Well, you gotta be politically nice and not say
I know that's the guy who owns the card, okay, but I don't say anything.
looking back, thank God he cut it too big and not too small.
Well, yeah, thank God, but it was obvious he knew. He didn't know that there was a plank on the sheet, too. He didn't know that the plank was valuable, and that was too small, okay?
Bill also mentioned an Eddie plank card in this collection, but it was cut down to a much smaller size. As you can see from this image, the plank from this collection doesn't appear to be too small. In fact, there are around 4 or 5 Piedmont plank known to exist, and the one shows here is one of them, and definitely in a much smaller size. Could this plank was the one Bill talked about, or there were more than one in the collection?
So I'm looking at it and I go, Bob, I said, this is not a mint condition Wagner. Look at this thing. What is this? And I go, I'm not paying $25,000 for this.
No way, it's an atrocity as it sits right now.
I'm not even sure what I love it because the colors are so bright and and I want it, but I'm thinking, what do I do here? So I said, Bob, I gotta hold on. I went out to the car because Lifson and I did all these deals together. So we're buying it together and he's not allowed in the store. Okay. So right. I go, listen, they still want $25,000. These cards are cut off an uncut sheet and the Wagner card is humongous. It's cut like a football. I don't know what to do. I said, how about I tell him I'll give him $25,000 for all the cards. There's a plank in there, which is too small. I said, we'll do that. I said, what do you think of that? And he goes, well, you saw him. Do whatever you're going to do. We'll do whatever. So I run back in. I go, here's the deal. I'll give you $25,000 for all the cards that are here. I don't know how many there were. There were more than 100.
And some important keys were there, obviously.
No, plank was in there.
Yeah,
but it was beautiful.
If people think the Wagner's the most overrated card, that might be the most underrated card in the hobby is the plank.
Well, I mean, it begs the question if maybe plank is as rare as Wagner. Maybe they really should be equal in value. They're both Hall of Famers, but that's beside the point. We can't recreate history. And I can't.
Verdict did not anoint that one. So.
Yeah, and I can't recreate the sheet. The sheet is gone. Okay, so I said, and of course I had to give him the money in cash. And he goes, those were the days. Remember the days when everything was done in cash? How crazy it was. So I go, I'll buy them all for $25,000. That's it. And let me tell you, I was going to leave. If he said no, I was leaving. Okay.
Well, you had to because you were buying something that, like, in its current shape, is nothing like you've seen because it's not.
It was a stretch. Let me tell you, it was a stretch. Okay, but I loved it. So he goes.
A lesson for people today. I can't tell you how many deals that I was a stupid ass and walked away from over $100 when someone was trying to get that extra little bit, and I walked away from something magnificent, something special that I would never buy again because I was a penny wise and a pound foolish, as the old expression says. And I just sometimes when you see something you know is right to own, buy, collect, keep, whatever your vision for it is, whether it's reselling or not, you just have to pay. And this is an example where you really were prepared to walk, but looking back, thank God you didn't have to because that would have been the greatest story you never told had you not been there.
$25,000.
That's a lot of money.
Was a ton.
What had the most expensive Wagner sold for? Like, what are the most expensive Wagner sold for?
$25,011. I bought one in the early '80s from Lou Lipset in an auction. $25,000.
And it was a normal size card that was nice. And
yes, and that was considered the best Wagner.
Would that have been like in the world of PSA grading? I don't know if that ever made it to a slab. Is that a 5 or a 6?
It probably by today's standards, about 5 back then would have been 6. When they started grading, probably a 6. It's definitely the second best card. That's the one that's in Cooperstown right now.
Okay, very good. Very good.
Here's an image of the Wagner card currently in Cooperstown. It's a beautiful card. It's unknown which advertisement bag it has.
Okay, so here's what happened. So I get the cards. I give them the money.
Hesitate about the 25 and I'm in awe.
Yeah.
I found a sucker who bought this football shirt.
No. The two of them went. The two of them had to go in the back and talk about it. And he came out. And he said, "Okay, give me the money." And he was not. Neither one of them were happy about it.
They weren't dancing and slapping 5. They found a sucker. They really didn't want to sell it. I
don't know about that. I mean, Sevchuk Harvard. I don't even know. I haven't talked to Sevchuk in a long time. I think he's harbored resentments his whole life over it.
Maybe.
I don't know why. I mean, but anyway.
If you harbored resentments over everything you sold, I used to own one of the PSA 10 Wilt Chamberlains that I bought for $4,000 and sold for $6,000. It's worth millions now. A fourth one just came out. It's worth millions.
I know what's a good thing about that story. What's a good thing about that story? You don't need the money.
I know, fortunately, but I get resentment for the guy that was so much smarter than me to pay $6,000.
You were doing deals.
I was 22 years old.
Yeah.
I did not know what I didn't know.
$6,000 was a lot of money.
To me, the whole hobby could go belly up at any time and not survive anymore. And I was playing hot potato. I was trading like these guys with the Pelican cases with cards that never should have been traded like Pelican case cards. They should have been treated like artwork and something special, which they are. And I didn't have the vision yet to know that. And now today, if I get my hands on something special, you will not pry it from my cold dead hands. I don't care what the price is. You can offer me 3x get value. Irreplaceable, you're not getting it.
But the reason for
If
that
it's irreplaceable, I will sometimes sell it and gamble I can replace it. But if it's a true one of a kind, irreplaceable, something truly special, you will not get that from me because again, you could offer to double my net worth. I probably wouldn't even do it then because if something means something to me, it's a principle. You're not getting it from my cold dead hands.
Yeah, but the key to that is that you're pretty well off, and you know what? The money isn't as important to you as it used to be. And you know that was look. If I always joke with John Ramirez. I love John Ramirez. We've known each other since we were kids. He's got one of the finest card collections, maybe the finest in the whole world ever put together. His whole life is baseball cards. He has everything. Okay. That's what he's got. Okay? He's never gotten rid of anything. All right. And I joke with him all the time. Even it makes him mad. I say, you know, you've still got your old black and white TV from when you were a kid because all he ever spent his money on was baseball cards. And you know, I could have a collection like that too, but I spent my money on kids going to college and cars and vacations, and you know. So
my net worth when I sold that chair, my net worth was like 40 grand. So like making $2,000 on that was a 5% increase in my net worth. Like think about that. I mean, really, that's pretty staggering. Maybe I was worth 100 grand, but still, that was a 2% increase in my net worth flipping that card. There's no way I was holding that for 30 years.
Yeah.
There's no way I was holding it. And I look back and I'm like, again, these are the lessons we have to learn from these. Or sometimes your vision has to be bigger than what everyone around you tells you your vision has to be. If you know you're right, and your premise and your premise and the premise for why you did something is true and it's right, people will try to sway you from your premise. If you know you're right, you're right.
Yeah, it doesn't make
sense. You're wrong. But like the biggest mistakes in my life from a business transactional standpoint were knowing I was right and either being scared out of a position or talked out of a position or made it feel like I was being overconfident, like my premise was wrong. And I look back and I'm like, so I hope people take that from your story as a little side note is when you know something's right, it's right. And don't walk for a few dollars. If you really need or want to own something, just pay. Because the regret is a lot more than that $100 or $200 or $500 sometimes.
Well, that $25,000 was a lot of money then.
I'm sure. Oh God.
And so I gathered up the cards after I paid for them. I got in the car with Lifson, and he was driving, and I showed him the card, and he goes, "Oh my gosh!" He goes, "Look at this thing." And I said, "Oh, it's magnificent. I mean, but what do you do with it? You know?" So we had the card.
It's funny how it can be magnificent and unusual at the same time.
It was an elephant. It was an elephant man, and we put it on the dashboard. Okay. we popped it up on the dashboard as we're driving down the Long Island Expressway. And
thank God you didn't stop quickly, or else we might have been dealing with a PSA here.
We're both looking at it, and I go, you know, I said, it's so huge. I think I could straighten the borders, and it would still be one of the biggest Wagner cards in the hobby. And he goes, "Oh my gosh, you know, goes, you would do that?" I said, "Oh, I love it." I said, "I just love it." I said, "Look, I know we own it together. We own all these cards together. Is there any way I can end up with this card?" He says, "What are you talking about? You already own the best Wagner card in the hobby. Why do you need another one?" I said, "Well, maybe we could do something with my Wagner because we do something with my Wagner card and we make some money on that, and then I end up with this card." I said, "Let's think about it, you know." So because I wanted to get the card home, so I get the card home, and we sold all the other cards to Charlie Conlon, including the Plank card, for like $5,000, all of them, the whole pile.
Bill mentioned that Charlie Conlon purchased the rest of the collection for $5,000. This letter from Bill Mastro, dated October 20th, 1986, matches what Bill discussed, noting the sale of the finest looking Plank card with a Piedmont bag.
That hurts too. Oh my God.
That's amazing. $5,000, including the Plank card. Okay. And so I've got it on my desk and I'm looking at it for days, and I'm going, and I'm putting like straight edges on the sides, you know, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, man, this thing is just, this should be mint, you know? And I'm thinking, you know, I don't know if I can cut it. I don't know if I have it in me to do it, you know? And you have to remember something. There was no ill intent here. I wanted it for me. I wasn't going to do anything to it to deceive anyone.
Well, there was no grading company.
No, there were no grading companies.
Honestly, the father of modern trade, the father of the trading card category, pasted all his cards in a flipping book. So like the idea of straight out of the pack condition only was just not really what it was. And people wanted nice copies, obviously, that weren't aesthetically pleasing. And I guess putting them in the book, they were still aesthetically pleasing. But that's consistent with the card. It's about it being aesthetically pleasing.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that we shouldn't be able to cut up on cut sheets. It does not make sense. If the card is the right size, trimming implies that you've made the card smaller than its intended size. Now, I get it. T206s are all different sizes. Okay, there's no uniform size. There's no uniform size. And well, here, I'll give you an idea. Okay, so I called Lifson up and I said, "Listen, here's what I want to do. I want the card. Let's sell my card. My card will become ours. Let's sell it to Barry Halper for $30,000. Okay, and I'll keep this card." And he said, "What are you going to do with it?" I said, "Well, I'm going to cut it. I'm going to straighten the board."
What does he say right then? What's his first reaction?
He goes to me, he goes, "Well, you sure you want to do that?" I said, "Look, I think it'll come out looking absolutely gorgeous, and I want it for me." And I said, "I'm going to keep it." And he goes, "Okay." He goes, so he calls Halper. Halper buys my card for $30,000, and I get the cutting board out, and I've got it on my desk, and I had the phone.
When you say cutting board, is this like a paper cutter like we know today?
An old paper cutter. Yeah, I still have it.
And by the way, if you
I know.
I told Bill before this, and many times, that if that thing ever leaves your possession, this is an example of what I'm telling you guys who are watching this. If there's something you want desperately, you pay whatever it takes. And I've told Bill, and I'll make the donation to charity or give him money. I want the paper cutter because honestly, to me, it's the second most important relic in the history of the hobby behind the card, because it's iconic to me, because I think it's part of a story. It's like when you hear Eddie Goodell's story. There's so many great things about the story, but like things that are critical.
It doesn't look like much. I mean, it's just.
Guess what? Neither does the Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
So we've been there.
Okay,
I'm interrupting you. So you say I want to cut this thing because I want.
So I have the card.
There's no grading companies.
No. So I have
People look at the card in its pure form. What is it? What does it look like? Is it about the right size? When someone buys a card, that's what they're looking for,
I
right?
just don't think anyone in their right mind would have left it the way it was. It really was.
It's like someone took a Hostess cupcake sheet, the Hostess cards,
Yeah, sure.
or postcards, and cut them past the perforations. Someone might have further cut them to the perforations because that's where it should have been cut the first time. And so is that really an alteration? Like, I don't know. Like, this is.
I don't feel like it is. Okay, so all right, so I get Lipson on the phone. He's on the phone and he's listening. I said, okay, I'm going to cut the card now. He goes, oh my God. He goes, why am I on the phone? I said, I want you to hear it.
Oh my God. Are you freaking out?
Yeah. So I cut the two borders. Okay. Just the two side borders. Do you know that if you show that card to most people, they think that I cut the top and bottom. And let me tell you something. I was tempted to make them straighter, but I didn't, because I didn't want the card to be too small. And if you take that T206 Wagner card and you get all the Wagner cards in the hobby and you put them all end to end from largest to smallest, it's one of the biggest. It's absolutely
And
one
to
of the
give
biggest.
people some color here, and when Beckett grading first started, they would grade cards that were sheet cut.
Yep.
And the critical mistake was they didn't label the slab sheet cut.
Well, PSA did too, but they just didn't know it.
They just didn't know it. But Beckett knew it. But I was in a hotel room in Addison, Texas, with the biggest cutter of sheets. I won't say his name because he's not really in the hobby anymore, but he's been somewhat famous / infamous. And this guy bought 100 sheets of 85 tops, and with a paper cutter, cut every McGuire out. And I looked at them and I was like, hold on, these are all too big. And he says, and that's how sheet cut cards get put in slabs, because no one ever makes cards larger when they alter them. They make them smaller.
Yep.
And so he cut them all too big, and they all would end up in the slab because they were too big. They weren't minimum size requirement or whatever terms they use. In contrast, it might have been maximum, exceeds maximum size, but it was just, this has been around forever. And the fact is, there's been a great discussion forever of, if a machine cuts a sheet or a person cuts a sheet, the card was intended to not be sold on the sheet. It was never intended for sale in that way.
Well, I always found it offensive when people would talk to me about trimming the Wagner card, because I never felt that way. And you have to remember something. I wanted that card for myself. I got rid of the best Wagner card in the hobby to keep that card for myself. But that was when I had paid $25,000 for it. A year later, somebody comes along and offers me $100,000. I'm like, wow, that's insane. Okay. And for that year, when people looked at the card, no one thought anything of it. I never, I didn't hide the fact that it was from an uncut sheet.
The buyer never looked and said, hey, where did this come from? I want to know the whole history of it.
We never went into it. I brought it out to California, and he looked at it. He loved it. Greg Buzino loved it. I loved it. I still love it. Whether it was in a PSA holder or not, okay, never, because you have to remember, PSA didn't exist. So it was just a gorgeous Wagner card, the most gorgeous Wagner card. And interestingly, I was out in San Luis Obispo, and I called the Mercedes-Benz dealership from the airport and said to the dealer, I said, hey, listen, do you still have that 560 SL, the sports car, the little red sports car? And I went from the airport to the dealership and bought a car, and still had lots of money left over from a Wagner card, which I know it seems crazy, but I've always, the values of this stuff have always perplexed me. I've never quite been able to get my hands around the intense values of the stuff. And yet,
and it comes from someone who loves the stuff.
I do love the stuff.
And you still have trouble getting your arms around.
Oh, I do.
The intrinsic value we put on these things.
If something becomes hugely valuable money-wise, I have to catch myself not to look at it every time and see $100 bills.
So when you see a Victor Wembanyama card sell for $1 million or a LeBron or something, you're ready to just
to me, it's crazy. But you know what? I mean, how crazy can it be? I've been wrong so many times about values. Who knows?
And if you haven't been wrong a whole lot of times, either you're lying or you haven't bothered enough. You haven't presented enough opinions about things.
For a guy that sold everything he ever got his hands on, I've done pretty well for myself.
You haven't. So okay, so you decide you're going to cut the card. Yep. On the phone, he's cringing because he hears that. Like, oh my God, this guy is. And again, I don't know how common it was for people to make sure the card measured with the right size. But like,
I think it was back then more of a visual thing.
Yeah, you just want it to be appealing. But again, I think you painstakingly made sure it was the right size, correct?
Oh, I was. That's what kept me from doing
the distinction. That's the distinction
between the top and bottom.
I think that's the distinction that people have to understand is. And now we see with grading, the companies, their primary concern, and yes, they'll see things that they don't like where it looks like a sheet cut, they won't put it in a slab for whatever reason. But there was a time where they really were like, the card just needs to measure correctly. Now, the nefarious in the industry, now what they do is they will flatten the card.
Crush them.
And make it too big. So that they can cut it down and it measures. And I've talked to people at the grading companies who are like, it's amazing. These guys, every card they send us is perfect. It measures correctly. And we don't know what they're doing. And it's like, if you're making a pizza and you want to size it perfectly, you spread out the dough to exactly the size you want it to be, or you make it bigger and then cut around, or a cookie. You have to have more dough there than the cookie cutter is so that it's correct. And I think that's what they're doing is they're spreading the dough to cut it. The fact is, it's a more nefarious process, or I say a nefarious process, when someone flattens the card to cut it. Rather, they take it in the state they inherited and correctly size it. It's almost like fixing a car. You fixed something that was not done correctly. And again, this is a tough one because some people say, Brian, you're wrong. This is altering a card for the purpose of, increasing the value from what it really is. But I don't know. So kind of fill in the blanks. You're like, you were nervous at first, but then you said, hey, I'm cutting it to the correct size. I do not want it to be the wrong size. I want it to be like the card was supposed to be in the first place.
And I wanted it for me.
You didn't color it. Yeah, you didn't color it. You didn't
Yeah,
do all this stuff that's designed to make it look like something it's not. You just wanted the card to be the size it was supposed
And
to be.
it's. I mean, you've seen the card.
Yeah.
It's just the most magnificent item in the hobby.
And you're going to keep it.
That was my intention.
If you look at the hobby now, people care more about eye appeal than the grade in many cases.
They do.
I've always said that when I buy a 52 male, the best one I'm ever going to own is probably going to be an authentic altered copy. Because I'm going to buy an authentic altered that looks like a 7 or an 8.
Yep.
Because I would rather have that in my collection, authentic altered, than a 1 or 2 that's wrinkled so bad that Mickey looks like they pictured him yesterday on the card. He's in the grave. And that's how he looks now. That's what some of these Mantle rookies look like. And I understand people who are purists, but I would rather have an authentic altered copy that is just stunning and presents the art the way it was intended to be presented. And so now people are more accepting of that. So you would think that we've evolved a little bit from the brainwashing of, whatever's supposed to be right, they say or not, to we care about eye appeal. So that's where you were back then. You cared about eye appeal. So, so you cut, stopped crying on the line, and are you like, I got it right the first time, it's perfect? You didn't
absolutely. Yeah. And I never wavered from the fact that I thought it was the most spectacular thing that I ever saw. And I still feel that way. And, I'm not, look, I don't have $50 million to spend on a baseball card. But, when that card, if it ever gets sold, which probably will, at least not in our lifetimes, maybe, that card is going to be, that card's going to set world records. And it's not going to set world records, or people are not going to shy away from it because they know the story of what Bill Mastro did. They're going to look at the card and they're going to say, that's the most magnificent item in the entire hobby.
I got to be honest, I think the story enhances the value. It's almost like Pete Rose. I was close with him when he was alive. And Pete, although he was pissed he didn't get in the Hall of Fame, he made way more money in his lifetime not making the Hall of Fame than he would have had he made it. Because if he'd made it, all the money he made the last 20 years of his life, he would never would have made. He always made lots of money because he was controversial and this and that.
Sure.
I think the story of this card adds to the value of the card. I think if another PSA 8 came out tomorrow, yes, it would still sell for a lot. But I think the story on the card, there's a value there. There's an ownership legacy, with McNall Gretzky, with Ken. There's so many people. I mean, it's just the card's got a great legacy to it.
For those who may not know, this PSA 8 Honus Wagner card is particularly famous because it was once owned by hockey legend Wayne Gretzky and Bruce McNall. They co-owned the card at one point, but the card was sold shortly after to Walmart and without making a huge profit that time.
So, and again, I don't want to get too caught up in the details, but when you cut it, was it slice, finished? Or was it slice? Okay, I think it's an important distinction because one is making a correction, controversial maybe, but I think there's an argument for returning it to the original. To not even return it, to just cut it the way it should have been cut the first time is one thing. Sit there and trimming it down again and again and again, like to fine tune it.
I didn't need to. I mean, my cutting board is an older cutting board with a kind of a rough cut edge to it. And all I needed to do was make one cut on each side. One cut. Yeah.
Hopefully Colin's family or someone reached out to you and said, hey, do you still have that cutter? We got a plank and some other stuff we need.
It's funny because I probably, with that cutting board, because of the way it is, I probably could cut anything. Because it gives you a rough cut.
And we never talked about this, but did you ever have other situations where you felt like you needed to make a card look like it was originally designed to look, or was this truly a one-off circumstance?
No, this was definitely a unique circumstance for that kind of situation. I abhor the stuff that's been going on in the hobby with the trimming and the coloring and the squashing and I guess, hey, look, here's my attitude. And I had this discussion with the government when they were questioning me. If the card had a crease and the crease was taken out, and you can't tell that the crease was taken out, where's the damn issue? Okay,
that's a great question because now, and again, I like the guys at CGC, the comic side. I work with the card side. But they actually will press your comic book. You send them a comic book that's wrinkled, and before they grade it, they will actually press out the wrinkles. The grading company will take the wrinkles out before they book it. So
that's great. Why
it is. And honestly, I'm an advocate. If PSA ever hired me as a consultant, which I can't because I have another gig now, but I would tell PSA, I believe you should have a different grading scale for cards that you believe are altered. And I think, honestly, a card that's been trimmed should still be graded. And I think it should be AA9, AA8, AA7, which basically grades the eye appeal of a card that has been altered or restored. And I don't want to just say altered, I'll say restored. Because there are cards that have staining that I think as a clean card would have more value to someone from an eye appeal standpoint than it's just being a relic in its condition.
But again, if you cannot detect the alteration, okay, in any way, shape, or form, is it altered?
Well, if it's altered probably. But I think that's the question we really have to ask ourselves is, why are trading cards the only asset class where an alteration we think spoils something instead of
preserving?
No. If you have a 57 Chevy where the carburetor has been replaced with a modern version, you just sell a 57 Chevy with a modern, and someone pays a little bit less, but it's still a 57 Chevy.
Right.
That card
In all these museums in the world, the vast majority of the artifacts, including especially the artworks, have some degree of restoration or preservation. Okay,
These paintings from the 1200s or 1000, they're not existing in their perfect form without any level of alteration, preservation, or restoration.
I was at Sotheby's for years. I was always a night owl. I would work because you couldn't get any work done there during the day. I'd go in at 3, 4 in the afternoon. I'd work all night. I'd be the only one in the building with the security guards. And who else? The restorers. The building was full of restorers, working on things. I'd order pizzas and everybody be in my office eating pizzas. Okay. I mean, it's crazy to think that these things don't deserve some kind of respect in terms of, don't get me wrong. I think there's certain places I just don't want to go. But I don't really, no one will ever convince me that what I did with that Wagner card was wrong in any way, shape, or form.
And you never had a legal problem on the Wagner card?
No, I never. No, that was always a marquee thing. It was a promo thing for the government. It had nothing to do with my case. Nothing.
Because fundamentally, whether you agree or disagree about the purity of the card at that stage, legally it doesn't change anything. I mean, there was no fraud. It's not like you sold it and said, hey, this card is exactly as it came out of the pack, yada, yada, yada. It was what it was. It was, you looked at it, you could measure it, you could do everything you want to do to it. You could have taken it to a forensic paper examiner if such a thing existed then and had them look at it. You could have done anything. So I don't think it was fraud in that sense. And that's the problem is with the narrative that's out there. People act like this was like the most grievous act in the history of the hobby when it's not even remotely close. Hell, that store where they killed the store owner is 50 billion times worse than anything we're talking about here. Yet people act like this is the most egregious incident in the history of the hobby. It's just, I've always struggled, even before I became friends with you, I've struggled to have that perception of it. I don't understand. And I'm a purist, and I'm a completist, and I'm all these things from the old school.
But there's always naysayers. You know that. There are people.
The vocal minority, I like to call it.
Definitely. Yeah.
And so I think so let me ask you a dumb question. So, and again, I'm gonna skip some of the stuff like that. He sold it to me. No, we know a lot of that story. When you've read the card, right? The book. Did you read it?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, so when you read it,
can I just interject something there?
Yeah.
Okay. Michael O'Keefe is the least objective human being in the world in regards to me. He came to my office, okay, and under the guise of interviewing me on a story for the hobby. And when I realized that he was going to write some horrible things about the card, I threw him out. I gave him a choice. I said, you can go out the front door, or I can throw you through the plate glass window. I said, I've had enough of you. Get out of my office. And ever since then, okay, he's written the most egregious articles about national auctions, about me. So the card, the book, there's so many inaccuracies in it. So many mistruths, so many people making conjectures and surmising things about what happened. You know what? It was a tremendous work of fiction that I think people really enjoyed reading, but certainly Michael O'Keefe should not get any credit for being objective and being truthful. You're
reading this thing and you're like, son of a bitch.
I had
what's wrong with this guy?
I had a publisher's pre-printing copy of it. Okay. And my brother's a huge lawyer in New York. And I said, listen, I want to just bury this guy. I said, this guy's horrible. And, there really was nothing I could do about it. You can't, live in a free society. You can say anything you want to about people. But that book's ridiculous. It's a total work of fiction.
And the problem is, I think the greatest story never properly told was told in a way that people have accepted that as the fact because it was the only story out there. Which is why when we talk, and again, we've been friends.
He did write a book. Okay.
Yeah, the last couple of years. And we only talked about the idea of telling the story for the first time at the National. And I was scared you were going to punch me because I was like, so many people, and I'm not going to say the names, but there are people in the media in our hobby who, if they called you and asked you the same question, you would know that they're going to have a negative slant. They're going to be an O'Keefe Jr. They're going to have a negative slant, and they're going to try to look like a hobby hero by bashing on you. And that wasn't my goal. My goal was, I just want to hear the story. I just want to hear, did you sit there and cut the card down again and again until you felt it was perfect, no matter what the size was? Was there care to make sure it was in the original condition it was intended to be? Because it was never intended to be a football either. So when it was cut like a football, it was never intended to be like that either. But guess what? It wasn't intended to be an uncut sheet either. In fact, the uncut sheet was
a shame. You got to admit, it's a shame that uncut sheet didn't survive.
Oh my God, what money! But that uncut sheet is probably worth, because the Wagner was truly perfect on the uncut sheet.
But there would be a lot of people who wouldn't want that as an uncut sheet.
And guess what? That's not how it was intended to be distributed. No more than the football was intended to be distributed. Yeah. In fact, if I wanted to justify what you did, I would say you're the only person in the food chain that distributed the card the way it was supposed to be distributed. Now, that would be obviously defending my friend to a point of nausea, maybe. But my point is,
you're not objective either, Brian.
I'm not objective. I'm objective in people wanting to know the truth, because they deserve to know the truth. Because I don't know if they deserve to know the truth. I want them to know the truth because this has become the greatest story in the history of the hobby.
A lot of people don't care. A lot of people don't care about the truth.
You know what though? And I'll say those people, all they care about is a card in a PSA or Beckett or CGC or whoever SGC slab. They're just treating this as commodities. It's 2.4K, 4.9K, 3.6K, $800, 12, 1.2K. That's all. It's all numbers. So they don't care about the people on the cards half the time. Most of the people who are buying and selling huge big cards, I know people that really don't care. They just want to know the value.
Yeah, they want the number. Yeah.
They want the number. And not just the number on the slab, but the number price-wise, and that's what drives them.
That's it for part 1 of this video. Stay tuned for the second part, and please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you have any thoughts on the discussion in this video, please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.